So I've just finished one of the earrings and I'm gonna do the tutorial and we're gonna finish the second one together. I just love these, they're so shiny. And these bicones have like the nicest little shine to them too. Okay, we're gonna start off by taking our fabric and we're just gonna cut this in half. Cut that in half. And then we're gonna glue, oops. We're gonna use this E6000. So you gotta be really careful with this glue. I wrecked one of my little mat pieces because I got glue on my finger and then I touched it and it just like left this big glue streak on the mat piece, and it was, yeah, I ended up not using it because it just, there was no fixing it. So I just glue it down. I put the glue on the fabric. You gotta be careful because sometimes the glue will leak a little bit through. So make sure you have like a piece of paper. I'm just gonna put it on this little tray. I'd rather get glue on the tray than the table. And then I push the glue off. The glue comes out like right away. You gotta put your cap on. Get that on there quickly. Okay. Then I just put that right on there. And then I push it down. I be very careful to watch to see if I can see glue like seeping out the edges. And if it seeps out, you kind of want to stop pushing it and just let it dry that way. But it's not really seeping out, so I think that was like a good amount. And you're gonna wanna let those dry, I would say like maybe 24 hours. So I actually have one that I did earlier today, so we'll use this one, but I'm just gonna let these ones dry. Let those dry, I'll put them over there. So this one I only did earlier today, so I hope that it's somewhat dry. The only reason I say that is because if you for some reason get glue on your finger and you get the glue onto the mat piece, it's just gonna show, it's not gonna look very nice. So we're gonna start by, the next step will be to thread our needle. So we're gonna, all I do to thread my needles is I take the end of the thread and I just like pinch it until you like see a little bit peeking out, and then you're just gonna line up the needle hole and then poke it through and then just pull it through. Usually that I can get it on the first try, so that's good. And then we're just going to tie the two ends. So you're kind of using like a double thread. Oh, oops, I actually lost that one. That's okay. I'll double knot it. So I'm gonna do a double knot. I might do a triple knot because I think I lost one of my knots. Like one of the threads didn't get knotted. So I'm just gonna go in for a triple knot just to make sure that it's knotted well. So there we go, we have our knot. Okay, so for this technique, you're gonna actually need both your needles threaded. I've already threaded the other needle, so I'm ready to go. I have two of my needles threaded. So you're always gonna start from the back. You're gonna poke your needle through the back and you're gonna bring it to the front. And this is the beginning of putting your beads on. So we have that all set up. Okay, now we're gonna start putting the beads on. I'm just gonna follow this pattern. So we have like these little like triangle patterns for the first two rows. So it's gonna just be two purple and then two white, two purple for the first row. So we're gonna follow that pattern. I guess it doesn't matter which color you start with. I love these little containers. I got them at Michael's. I think they come in like packs of like 16 or something like that. So I'm just gonna put like maybe 10, 12 beads on and just start with that. Okay, I got some beads on there. And so the thread that has your beads on, that thread is just gonna be to put the beads on the thread. And then you're gonna use a second thread and needle that has like roughly 2 arms length of thread. You don't wanna put too much thread on there because it gets tangly, so it can easily get tangled. So if you're just starting out, I would just start with a little bit less thread, like maybe an arm's length and a half. Okay, so your left hand, well, my left hand, because I'm right-handed, so my opposite hand is gonna be like holding the first thread, and it's just gonna kind of like position the beads and like hold the beads as your right hand starts to do all the threading and all the beadwork. So you just kind of like find a way, like wrap it around your finger, whatever feels comfortable. My first time I felt like a little bit uncomfortable trying to hold it, so it's just find whatever works for you. Now I just literally wrap it around a finger and like comes a little more natural. And then your right hand or your dominant hand, if your left hand is your left hand, you're going to start doing the needlework. So again, you're going to come from the back and you're going to, so this is the 2 needle technique. So these are the 2 needles, and the second needle, the concept here is just your second needle is just gonna lay on top of your first thread. So the second needle isn't gonna go through any of the beads. It's just kind of securing down in between each bead, but on the thread. And then that's how it secures it. So the way I do it is I'm going to well, I already did. I brought my needle up in between the first and the second bead, but in between like that row of beads and then my centerpiece. So I'm just gonna pull that through, and then now this thread is gonna go over top your row of beads, but in between those beads, and it's just gonna like secure it by laying on top of the other thread. So you're just gonna pull that all the way through. Here, I'll pull that out a little bit just to see. So it's just kind of like, oops. Now I'm just gonna pull that, and it's just gonna lay on top of the other bead. Or not on the bead, on the thread. It's just laying on top of the other thread. And then you're just gonna repeat that. So you're gonna come through the back. Sometimes you just kind of poke around until you find that spot. Once you've done it like quite a few times, then it'll come a little bit more like precise to where you're poking it. But it's okay if you gotta poke around like 4 or 5 times until you get that spot. So again, I'm now in between the second and the third bead, and in between the row of beads and the centerpiece. And I'm just gonna go over that row of beads. I'm just going over the row of beads, and I'm gonna pull it. And then it's just gonna lay in between those beads, and it's gonna lay on top of that other thread. So this is the way I do the 2 needle technique. And I like this one because I feel like I have more control, and I can So I poked around and I got on my third try. So even me, I've been doing this for quite a while and I don't always get on my first try. And then I'm just, so you're going over that row of beads and pulling that down. And we're just gonna keep doing this. I'll just keep showing how to do it. And I'm trying to do it slowly so it's easier to see. And you don't want like huge spaces in between your beads. I mean, you can actually have huge spaces, but the way that I like to do it is I like to try and get my beads like fairly close to each other. And I secure every bead down. I believe you can like secure every second bead if you wanted to. And I think it really depends on the pattern too, if you're gonna wanna like skip a bead and do like every second bead. I think if it's like a more straight line, like your pattern's more straight, you might get away with it. So I have a bit of a tangle. So all I do is I like pull my thread out and then I like pull it back down. And it usually gets out that little, it's more like a nick, or not a nick, a kink. So we're just gonna do this all the way around. I'm actually gonna finish out this row and then I'll come back. And I'll show you guys how, and I'll show you how to finish off a row. So I'm just coming up to the end of my row. So my pattern, it's like I could technically fit one more bead on here, but then my pattern will be a little uneven. So I'm just gonna try and like space my beads out a tad bit just to keep my pattern like have a finished pattern all the way around. So I have a bit of a like bigger space on that one, and I'm just gonna do that all the way for the rest of the last, I don't know, like 2-3 beads. If your pattern is like doesn't finish off, like if you have like one white instead of 2 whites at the end of your pattern, that's fine. I'm just like so close to like having a complete pattern that I'm just gonna do this little trick and space them out a tad bit. And then, so I have like 2 beads left on here. So I'm just gonna take the needle that the beads are on, so your first needle, and I'm gonna feed it through the first few beads. I usually do like 3 or 4 of them, and then that'll complete the row and it'll bring that whole row together. And then I'm gonna put that needle down, and there's a couple beads I didn't tack down, so I'm gonna take my second needle and I'm just gonna tack down those last, I think it's 2. Tack down the last 2 beads. Oh, I'm like poking my needle where my knot is, so it wasn't going in very nicely. I might have to move my knot a little bit. Okay, that's going in. There we go. And you can kind of like adjust them a little bit if they're a tiny bit wonky. So at the very end, I was definitely like leaving bigger gaps, but honestly, you can't even tell. And I have like a complete pattern all the way around. That's not always the case. Sometimes my patterns aren't complete, and that's fine too. It's like with your beadwork, there's so much details that it's very hard to see like those little well, they're not even mistakes. Those just like little inconsistencies. Okay. So now I have finished my first row. Both my needles should be in the back. And now you're going to start your second row. So I always take my shorter needle when I'm doing another row of beads. Okay, so it looks like this needle here is my shorter needle. So I'm just going to bring it through, and you're going to pop it like right beside that row, slightly off. And then I'm going to put the beads on my shorter needle. Just because it takes more thread to do all your beadwork, so I always leave my longer needle for that part. Oh, right, and the pattern, let's see what the pattern is. So it's doing 4 purples and then 1 white, and it's going to create like these little triangles. So you want to kind of position or try and get the 1 white on top of the first row of like those, where there's 2. I cannot talk. Where there's 2, you're gonna want to try and like aim to get that white bead on top of those ones. So I can probably do like a purple. I should have pulled my needle up right in between 2 whites. That way it would have been easy. But that's okay. I can probably do 2 purples, or 1 purple and then a white. Let's just try and measure and see how this is gonna turn out. Yeah, that'll work. So I have a purple, and then I'm gonna do a white right away. And then I'm gonna do 4 purples. It's okay if you have to do like 5 purples or 4 purples. It just always depends on how you're spacing it. So you might be leaving bigger spaces, or smaller spaces, so your pattern might be a little bit different. I think on this earring, I actually had 5 on one of them. Yeah, so this one right here actually has 5. So my pattern, it changed a little bit, but I think the key is you just want to kind of get that white bead on top of the other 2 white beads. So this, oh my gosh, I love these purple beads. I don't know if you can see in the camera, but they are like spotted purple beads. They're so pretty. I always try and use a variety of beads, unique beads in my kits. Okay, so we're gonna start doing the beadwork. So with your other needle, the longer needle, you're just going to continue to do what you were doing on the first row. So you're just bringing your needle up between the 2 rows, and then you're just going over that row of beads and between the beads so that that thread lays on top. It just lays on top of the other thread. And you definitely, I don't think I mentioned this, but you definitely don't want to pull that thread too tight. Like, tension does play a role. I think it just kind of like makes it go a little bit wonky if you're pulling it too tight. I actually notice it sometimes when I'm doing it, is because my fabric will start to, like, as you do a few rows, it'll start to be a little like wonky too. And we're just gonna continue on. I'll just continue to show a couple more. Sometimes angles help to see better what I'm doing. Okay, so we have those 4 beads there. Now I'm gonna add a white bead. And then I'm just gonna do 4 more of these beads. And if your pattern when you get to your next white is a little bit off, then you can always just like take off some beads to make sure it's lining up. Always adjust. That's why I only do, when I'm doing like a pattern design, I'll only put like, I think I'm doing like 5 beads right now, just because I might need to switch it up, just depending on like my spacing and if my pattern is being consistent. Okay, I'm gonna finish this off and then I will come back and we'll do the rhinestone banding. We have the purple rhinestone banding that we're gonna do next. So now if we look at our first earring, so now we're on to the third one, which is rhinestone banding. And it's like this purple banding right here. Super nice. So with the rhinestone banding, you're gonna take your longer needle. If one of your needles is short, you can tie it off. I'll actually show how to tie off a needle. Or I'll use the short needle, that way we can tie it off and I can show how to tie off a needle. So when you're doing the rhinestone banding, the first little just your first little needle or your stitch, it's gonna be the hardest one to get on, and then once you've secured that, it kind of like keeps it still, so then you can begin to work with it. So it's gonna be the same concept as the two needle technique, where you're just gonna go over there's like these little spaces, so your thread is just gonna lay on top of those spaces. So you're gonna position that. I'm gonna pull my needle all the way through. And then now I'm gonna do the first one. So I'm just like going over the banding. You wanna make sure you hold that still while you pull the thread. And there we go. So I got the first one. Sometimes it slides around and it can be a little bit hard to get that first one on. And I'm just gonna do the second one. And yeah, so you're just the exact same concept. It's just securing in between each one. Again, you could probably do, or some people probably secure every second one, but I'm just gonna secure every one. I just like that it has a like nice symmetrical finish when I do every one. Okay, it's fairly short now. I've used most of it up. So all I do is I take the needle and I put it through the loop to make the knot. Then I use my finger. So I kind of like go inside of the loop and I just hold down the base of the thread and the needle will form, and then you can kind of like readjust, pull, readjust. But just using your finger or your nail and holding that knot to the base. That's how I do it. I think there's many ways you could do this, but this is the way I do it. And I pulled that one. So I want my knots to lay on top of each other just to make that big secure knot. Sometimes they don't lay on top of each other, so I'll do like a third knot. But that one seemed to work out fairly well. I'm just gonna pull that. And then you can cut that needle off because it's just gonna get in the way if it's hanging there. So I leave a little bit, like I don't cut it right at the base because I'm gonna take my glue and I'm gonna glue it down a little bit more. I just feel like that secures it more. Don't know if it actually works, but I feel like it does. Now you're gonna take your second needle and we're going to finish off securing this rhinestone banding down. So I'm just about finished here, and you're just gonna kind of eyeball where to cut, like which one is the closest to it being finished, to making a full circle. And I feel like this one is. It's okay if there's like a bit of a gap, if you had to cut one a little bit further away. And then I'm just going to finish up this row, and then we can work on our next row with these like satin silky beads. They're so shiny. So you're gonna do the same thing as you did on the first row, where you're gonna start from the back, bring your needle forward, and just working with the first needle for this part is you're just gonna put on the beads. These ones are very, like, the edging is very rigid, and they are like kind of different sizes. Some are shorter, some are longer, but they do have a beautiful shine. I like to include a variety of beads, like I mentioned, just so you can kind of get a feel for other beads. And then I'm now working with my second needle. It's gonna be the same concept, just different beads. And you're gonna secure that. So I finished off that row. You can see how shiny they are. So nice. So we are on to the last row before we cut out our beadwork and do the edging. So this is another rhinestone banding. This is like a gold chain one. And we're gonna do the same thing we did with the purple chain. So I'm gonna take my needle. So that first little tack is gonna be the hardest one, because sometimes it'll move around on you. There we go, got that done. The beadwork is done, and now we can cut it out. So you want to be extra careful not to snip one of these threads or like these knots on the edge. So just be careful. When I'm cutting, I kind of like, if I see a knot close to the edge, I'll like try and like pull it in. You should have left some thread, some extra thread on those knots, so you can use that and just like pull it in. And then you're gonna start cutting. So I'm just gonna constantly be looking in the back just so I don't cut anything. And you want to leave like a little bit of space, but you definitely don't want like too much space. So we got a knot coming up, so I'm just pulling that one inward. Just looking, it looks like there's no more knots, so just being careful of any of the thread. You don't want to cut any of those off. we're gonna use this purple. It's like purple lace. It's nice. And we're gonna use this for our backing. So we'll attach this to the back and it will hide all of like this back thread. So I'm just gonna like try and tuck these little loose pieces in. If you snip one, it's not a huge deal at all, because it should have a knot, so it'll be fine. So you can trace it, or you can just like freestyle it and cut away. We're gonna also attach one of our earrings. So these like open up and then they close, so they clip onto your ear and they hold very well. Put 2 slits, like you'll have a bigger one and then just like a tiny one for this little part here that goes into your ear. So you can just draw lines on the back, or I just kind of like eyeball it. So I'll do one at the bottom, and then you just want to like make the tiniest little slit there, just enough for the little hole to go through. Should do. And you're gonna open up the clip and then you're gonna feed the bottom part through. You should wiggle it through. If you've made it really big, it'll probably just go in real quick. And then you're gonna poke the earring part through. So we're gonna take our glue again. And I like to put glue on all my knots, just so my knots don't come undone. So once you've let it dry for a bit, we're gonna now start our edging. So I take my needle, so you're starting with a brand new needle and thread. I'm going to start from the inside. So I'm gonna go on the inside. See if I can get that in. And then I'm just gonna try and tuck that piece of thread away. And then I'm going to just maybe like try and go in between 2 of the rhinestones, and just through the fabric that the beadwork is on, I'm just gonna try and bring it just through that. And then it should create this like little loop, and your starting base will be coming through the center. So it'll be nice and symmetrical. So we're gonna do the edging. We got these pretty Swarovskis. I think I'm saying it right. So we got these pretty beads. These are bicones. And we're just gonna use some of the white beads that we used earlier to do the edging. So only for your first little loop, you're gonna use 3 beads. So with the white beads, if you look, they like create this like little triangle. And then you have the bicone in the middle and then like another little triangle. So just for the first one, you're going to use 3 and then the pattern will change. So where the first bead is, you're just gonna go like a bead's width away. So you want those like fairly close to each other. And you want to try and like dig like downward, so you can get at least a good chunk of your needle through both materials. You want to have it super close to the edge because it might like come undone. It might like just rip through the fabric. So you want to try and like dig it in. So, and you're going to pull that. So you should have this like little floppy triangle, and then you're gonna bring the needle back up just through the bottom of that last bead. Oops. So you're just gonna bring that up and through, just the one bead from the bottom going up. then you're just gonna pull that through. There you go. And you have a little triangle. And then now you're going to, if you look at this one, you're gonna add a bicone. So your next one after the triangle, you'll have the bicone. And then a white bead. So the first one you used 3 beads, now you're using 2. And the pattern will just be adding 2 beads at a time on. So you're just gonna kind of eyeball, you're gonna lay them. So the bicone's gonna take up that much space, and then you're gonna put that white bead right beside the length of the bicone. So you can just lay those 2 beads to kind of see where that white one should go. And then you're gonna pull that, and you're gonna take your needle and you're gonna go up through the bottom and through the top of that white bead, just the white bead. And then you're gonna pull that thread all the way through, and you're gonna pull it nice and snug. Okay, and then we're gonna add 2 more whites. Just 2 beads at a time now. And then you're gonna put that a bead's width apart from that last white one. And you're going through both fabrics. And you're pulling that all the way through. And then you're just gonna go through that last white one through the bottom and up. And then you're creating that little triangle with the white beads. So we now have this another little triangle. And then 2 beads again. So the 2 beads, a bicone and a white. And for the rest of the pattern, it'll just be 2 beads at a time, 2 beads at a time. 2 whites, a bicone and a white, 2 whites. And then you can just lay those down. Oops. So you just lay them. And where that white one sits, that's where you're gonna put the needle is. And you kind of wanna push it downward so you get that needle going through a good chunk of the fabrics. So my pattern actually linked up perfectly, so that's quite lucky. Sometimes when you come to the end, you might have to like space your beads out a bit or like adjust your pattern a slight bit at the end just to finish it off. But this one worked out quite perfectly. So I have my last bicone on there. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your needle and you're gonna go through that bead, the very first bead, but you're not gonna go through any of the fabric. So you might have to like, kind of like bend your needle a bit to get it to come outward. And then, so your needle shouldn't have went through any fabric. It should just kind of just be coming out of that final last bead. And then you're gonna take your needle and you're just gonna poke it anywhere to get it back through both fabrics. And then you're gonna pull that. So that finishes off the beadwork. And then you're going to tie a knot. So now what I'm gonna do is like I'm gonna take my needle and I'm gonna go like inside the fabric. And I'm just gonna like push it through. And my needle should like pop out somewhere. And then I'm just gonna pull that and it should kind of like tug your needle, the knot. You should just kind of like hide it and tug it in. And then you're gonna take your scissors and you're just gonna cut that piece.